Eddie Brock and his son Dylan are both Venom. Eddie Brock died, but since he is the official King in Black, he found himself traveling through time to try and correct the situation, having gone back to fight against Bedlam, another version of Eddie filled with nothing but rage. Welcome to the Comicstorian Complete Story Series, where we take trade paperbacks and single issues and we break them down into digestible bites to help you understand. Then we read them dramatically back to you. All alterations to the panels, text, and images are to prevent copyright problems, and all art is owned by its respective companies. This is sadly the last Venom video that Benny had recorded for the channel. It was originally for members only, but I wanted to make sure all his work got used and that everyone got to see it. So this is Venom 21 to 25. I hope you enjoy.
Eddie looks up at the massive past version of himself. There's only one way out of here, Bedlam. It's in chains! Bedlam snorts at him. Chains! Soft, Brock! You're leaving in a coffin! Closed casket! The two leap at each other, trading blows, but Bedlam grabs Eddie by the head, slamming him into the counter. After 3 times, Eddie grabs a hold of the counter, wheeling it around, swinging it hard, and cracking Bedlam across the face. The monster stumbles, and Eddie hits him in the gut, surprised to find a semi-auto shotgun taped under the counter. Huh? Let me try something, Eddie says as he slams the counter into Bedlam's stomach again, and then he fires the shotgun 4 more times into the monster. Well, that was fun, Eddie says as he tosses the counter and shotgun away. But Bedlam merely stands up, a hole in his stomach, forming into a massive mouth. Now this is the fun part. Open wide, he says as the new mouth bites down on Eddie's whole body and begins to chew. Tough outer shell, gooey center. All the better to chew you up and spit you out, Bedlam says, spitting out the massively chewed mass of Eddie's body. This massive chewed up Eddie lands outside with a wet splat, and the bikers vomit in pure disgust. But moments later, Eddie begins to reform his body, making sure all the organs are in the right spot before Bedlam comes charging out after him again. All right, time for round 2, Eddie whispers. I'm the real Eddie Brock. You are a mistake from a dead timeline, Bedlam roars, but Eddie leaps over his head. We're all mistakes, big man. Thing is, I'm the mistake that's got the body. He lashes out with the nerve endings of his body, attaching them to Bedlam's head, allowing him to slip his consciousness into the monster's mind. Open your mind, Bedlam. I'm coming in, Eddie tells him, charging into the vast emptiness of Bedlam's uncluttered mind, where he fights against a massive version of the monster. But Eddie explains that this past version of himself is merely all of Eddie's rage, that he doesn't even have a body of his own. Finally, Eddie ends up in the deepest parts of Bedlam's mind, where he faces a past version of himself with the Venom symbiote. But Eddie informs his past self that he is just the muscle-bound bully that Eddie used to be, the one that was addicted to his own anger, that took it out on people. As the past Eddie turns into Venom, it launches itself forward, with Eddie grabbing him by the chest, ripping him apart, revealing the truth to his alternate version to himself. You're an empty suit, Bedlam, a costume. Without me, you're not even real, he says as he lets the symbiote fall to the floor, where it begins to wither and die. Without me, you're nothing at all, Eddie tells the dying symbiote. It begs for his help, and Eddie reaches a hand out to it. Together, we can be venomous. As long as you remember one thing, Bedlam, I'm in charge, Eddie says as the symbiote begins to crawl up his arm and bond with him. The two take on the persona of a 4-armed red Venom. And in the real world, the new Eddie stands tall, making the bikers all back up in fear. Anyway, now that that's settled, let's go see a man about a time machine. We now cut to a different time period. 1942. Flexo stares at his stasis pod as the scientists work, talking about how they have to freeze Flexo since he's disobeying orders and wiped out an entire German-held village. He killed a bunch of Nazis, one of the scientists says, but his friend points out that it was the wrong village and no one wants a weapon that doesn't listen. What we delivered was a monster that no one else can control, the scientist says. But their conversation is drowned out as the stasis pod begins to fill up and Flexo goes into a slumber. Decades later, Venom, but Dylan as Venom's battle with the Gold Goblin has damaged the liquid nitrogen lines, and Flexo has awoken, punching his way free of the tube, a single name escaping his lips. Eddie. Flexo gasps. Meanwhile, Dylan and Venom are leaping through the city, with Venom questioning why Dylan allowed Norman Osborn to live. Because we know it wasn't him you wanted to kill, so say the name, Venom says in Dylan's mind. Fine, you want a name? I want to kill Eddie Brock, my father, Dylan snaps as he lashes out, kicking a water tower. They continue to move through the city, with Dylan admitting that he wants to stop his father and any other King in Black in history, and that he wants to free the symbiotes from the King's control. But the conversation is interrupted by screams from below. Help! Monster! Someone shouts, and the pair turn to look down into the streets where the police have cornered the monster known as Flexo. It's not just a monster. I smell a Clintar, Venom says, and Dylan looks down at Flexo, who's standing quietly while the police aim their guns at him. Could be a new recruit, Venom notes, and Dylan agrees and has an idea. He leaps down, and Venom takes on the look of one of Tony Stark's armor. Don't worry, folks. Iron Man's here in the new Mark 123 organic metal armor. It's the future! Tony Stark, that's me, Dylan says, giving his best Tony Stark impression. He looks at Flexo holding out a hand. So that's who I am! Who are you? He asks, and Flexo's eyes glow as he stares at the metal man. Metal face, he whispers, remembering the day in 1942 when he wiped out the entire village of German soldiers. Someone floated over to him, speaking to him. Let Brock battle his future. Let him beat his own destiny into submission. Let him, even if he has won, he will learn that destiny does not battle me. Time and destiny do my will, as will you, Flexo. Flexo launches himself at Dylan and Venom, punching them hard, barely allowing time for Dylan to throw up a shield. He then turns his repulsor cannons onto Flexo, but it hits him with a blast of symbiote goo that knocks him into the wall. Dylan steps through the hole, and the symbiote shifts so that Venom looks normal. Metal face? Flexo asks, but Dylan shakes his head. No, Venom face. Who did you think I was? Flexo gets to his feet. Eddie, he whispers, more images of his past appearing in his mind, of being put into stasis, and a four-armed symbiote shouting at him. You're a symbiote, so you work for me, the four-armed symbiote shouts. Eddie Brock, Flexo says, rushing forward, hitting Venom again. But Venom lashes out, knocking him away. I think he thinks that we're my dad. We gotta try and contain him somehow, work out what his deal is, Dylan says to Venom. But Flexo's arm morphs into a Gatling gun and he fires symbiote bullets at Venom, hitting him hard and knocking him to the ground. Okay, so he's got a gun, Dylan groans from the ground. But his arm morphs into a blade as Flexo rushes at him and Dylan stabs the monster in the chest. Meet All Black Chainbreaker! Dylan shouts in Venom's voice, Flexo falling to the ground and the memories beginning to fade from his mind. Not Eddie, Flexo whispers, and Dylan nods as he pulls the blade from the symbiote monster's chest. It's Dylan. Dylan Brock. And I'm sorry I didn't think of that earlier, Dylan says as he leans over Flexo. Why else would I have been mad at my dad? You wanted to be free of the hive, Dylan says, helping Flexo to his feet, knowing that they can't head back outside. So he leads Flexo down into the sewers so that the two of them can escape. It's okay. You can stay with me for now, until they stop hunting you. After that, we'll figure some stuff out. We got time, Dylan tells him as the two escape into the darkness. But memories continue to flash through Flexo's mind of a voice floating over him in the village in 1949. Do not resist. Simply remember, who broke your destiny? What is his name? Eddie Brock, the King in Black. The time is right, and you will be the hand of my vengeance against him, against Venom. And his own son will be your weapon, Dr. Doom says as he floats over Flexo. Eddie Brock moves through the security lines of the Latverian airport under the watchful eyes of Doombots. Finally, he reaches the front of the line, where the Doombot asks him if he has anything to declare. No, Eddie says simply, but the bot can read that he is lying and orders him to open up his suitcase. I am not a human being, American. I cannot be fooled. Now show me what you have brought into our country, the Doombot orders. And Eddie shrugs, opening the suitcase, allowing the symbiote known as Bedlam to reach out and bite into the Doombot. Eddie turns as the rest of the Doombot security rushes through the airport towards him. You have damaged one of us, thus you have defaced the likeness of Doom. Explain yourself, the Doombots order, and Eddie smiles at them. I'm Eddie Brock, and I'm here to see your boss. Doc and me, we go back a ways, Eddie says with a smile. The Doombots opening fire on him, hitting Eddie with a maximum voltage from their tasers, but he manages to shrug it off. Bedlam finally drops his Doombot and turns on the out-of-time version of himself. Stop hogging, Brock! Bedlam is bored! The symbiote shouts, and Eddie nods, holding out his hand, allowing the symbiote to join him. Yeah, I guess we're a team now. Might as well let you join in, Eddie tells him. Now joined once again, Eddie and Bedlam rush at the bots, smashing his way through them. Later, Dr. Doom sits at a banquet table in his castle, sipping on wine. He turns to the sound of a knock at his door. Enter. The door is then smashed open as our Bedlam Brock hybrid charges inside. Doom doesn't flinch. Hello, Brock. Dinner? He asks, and Eddie looks at him for a moment, pausing in thought. Yeah, I could eat, he says with a shrug. Bedlam shrinks away, revealing the human image of Eddie once more as he sits down and tugs free a chicken leg. The two begin to talk, with Doom pointing out that he is impressed with how Eddie has established himself as a god by the sweat of his brow and the blood in his veins. Though he questions what reason Eddie could possibly have to come to Latveria and storm Castle Doom. Eddie explains that he is capable of traveling through time now, though he is only able to send his mind through time into different symbiote bodies. I can't change stuff with that. Only be the cause of it. I need a time machine, Doom. A real one like yours, Eddie says, and Doom shakes his head, explaining that he would never allow Eddie to take his property and use it to travel through time. I'm going to give you a chance to turn away from the path that you're on, Brock. I suggest that you take it to return home. Return to your son. He surely needs you more than whatever quest you're on, Doom tells him, and Eddie shakes his head, explaining that he is doing everything for his son. Doom nods, leaning back. Well, then there's only one question remaining. Shall we finish our meal like civilized men, or shall we start now? Doom asks, and Eddie doesn't hesitate, allowing Bedlam to overtake him again, tossing the massive table aside. Now's good, Eddie says as he grabs the table again, slamming it into Doom, but the ruler's personal force field defends him easily. Doom raises his hand, casting a spell that opens a portal for a massive demon hand to come through and grab Eddie, slamming him through the ceiling. Doom floats after them, pointing out that Eddie doesn't stand a chance against him. But Eddie reaches out, beginning to break the demon's fingers, snapping the bones until they retreat into the portal. Doom nods in admiration. Impressive. To force the awful arm of Azoth to retreat with such simple tactics. I'll remember that for my next visit to the Infernal Court, Doom says, raising his arm and beginning to open fire on Eddie. Eddie leaps away, slamming through another wall, breaking past the castle facade into Doom's labs. Quite the scenery! What do we have here? Eddie says as he finds Doom's time pad. He leaps towards it, realizing that he has discovered what he came for. But Doom chases after him, firing more energy blasts. You go too far, Brock! My patience has its limits, unlike my power. Doom shouts as a blast rips through Eddie's back. He stumbles to the ground as Doom stalks behind him. You should have finished your dinner, Edward. But Bedlam shifts off of Eddie and charges at Doom, biting into his indestructible armor. Bedlam is hungry, the monster bellows, and Eddie staggers over to the time pad, trying to figure out how it works as Bedlam keeps Dr. Doom busy. Wretched creature! Doom shouts as he blasts the symbiote free. He then whirls on Eddie again, his fists cracking with energy. Did you honestly believe that you could learn how to fly a time portal? Doom asks, and Eddie shakes his head. Maybe not, Doom, but I bet I know how to crash one, Eddie says as he slams his fists into the machine, breaking it quickly. The machine suddenly begins to spark and Doom rushes forward. No! It's activating! What have you done, Brock? He bellows as the machine suddenly ramps around them, pulling them through time. The time platform slams into the past, causing a massive crater. From the smoking ruins, Doom pulls himself up, his armored foot smashing down on a butterfly as he looks over his shoulder. Are you coming? He asks, and Eddie staggers out of the ruins. How's my driving? Doom glares at Brock, explaining that Brock did not drive. that once he haphazardly activated the time portal, it went into an emergency landing mode. He also explains that the time portal is a combination of science and magic. Magic creates synchronicities, meaningful connections, a dangerous element to add to a random temporal journey. What waits for you here in the late Cretaceous period, Brock? Doom says, turning to Eddie, his fist glowing dangerously. Well, aside from death in my hands, of course. He floats into the air, firing a beam of energy at Brock, and Bedlam wraps around Eddie's body, allowing the two to quickly escape. But there's suddenly a roar as something is pushing through the trees. Doom looks over his shoulder as a Venom-clad T-Rex pushes through the forest, roaring in anger. Doom and Brock stop their battle, looking at the beast in astonishment. Any relation? Don't look at me, Brock says with a shake of his head. The T-Rex stares at them, a massive tongue flailing around. Brock! It growls, and Doom looks at Eddie, shrugging. Seriously, I have no idea, Eddie says, and the T-Rex roars, charging at them. But Doom leaps into the air, firing energy blasts at it. Doom has sworn to kill a Venom today, and you will do as well as Eddie, he bellows, but Eddie looks back at the time platform. Doom, the platform's finished repairs, he shouts, but Doom fires a blast that knocks Eddie back. Doom travels alone, Brock. I will leave you here in a bed that you have made to consider your failures. But Eddie is already back on his feet. Doom, you're forgetting something. You're weak against stretchy guys, Eddie Brock shouts, using Bedlam's forearms to stretch out and pummel Doom. His fist smashed the steering device on the platform again. You've broken the platform again. Did this experience teach you nothing? Doom bellows as Brock leaps on the platform and they both disappear again. The T-Rex watches as they disappear when suddenly its form melts and reforms as Meridus, the Eddie Brock at the end of time who rules over all. They now arrive in 1942. Allied bombers launch their secret weapon over occupied France. Flexo slams into the ground and reforms, but he is silent as he surveys the destruction around him. Nearby, Dr. Doom has launched an attack against the German forces, but there's a voice in Flexo's mind. He turns to a nearby church that is still standing. Don't get distracted. I need you over here, the voice says. Flexo heads into the church to meet with Eddie Brock. You're a symbiote, so you work for me now. You know who I am? The King in Black. That means that what I say goes, Eddie explains. Flexo doesn't respond, but Eddie continues explaining that he has hidden the citizens of the village in the church's basement, and that Flexo has to wait until the Germans and Dr. Doom are gone before he can let them out, so they'll be safe here. Flexo doesn't respond. Eddie decides to drop into Flexo's mind and relay his message, but he sees a memory of Flexo's briefing and realizes that the symbiote was a secret weapon that was being sent to kill Hitler. Eddie rushes outside where Doom has finished killing the German forces. Doom, we've got to go back. We've got to stop ourselves from coming here. We're changing things for the worse, Eddie says as he leaps at Doom and the time pad. But Doom destroys the last German in his grasp before turning to fight Brock once more, pointing out that this is the mindset of a novice time traveler who wants to try and fix things. As Flexo walks out of the church, he watches silently as the two time travelers disappear. This time, they appear in New York, with Doom arriving at the Latverian embassy while Brock is somewhere in the city and, due to strange coincidences of a magically powered time travel, runs into a young Peter Parker. Doom speaks of his problems to his younger self, while Eddie becomes angry with Peter over how their lives turned out, how he was once a villain and now walks the path of a heroic redemption, even though it is much harder. With a new idea given to him by his younger self, Doom finally returns to Brock with a time platform. Eddie has all but given up, sitting in the alleyway when he sees Doom. Are you here to kill me now? Or are we going to do something else? Eddie asks, and Doom looks down at him. Time for something else, I think. You want a time machine, Brock, and I will not permit you to take mine. But through the infinite mercy of Doom, a compromise can surely be reached. For I have many enemies, some even shared with you. Sometime in the distant future, Kang looks up from his desk in the office of his flagship destroyer. That time again. Hello, Victor. I see you've brought a guest. Kang says with a smile, and as Doom and Eddie move through the ship, they are confronted by Kang the Conqueror. Hello, Edward. Where in the timeline are you now? I need a time machine, Kang. Doom told me I could have one of yours, Eddie says, but Kang refuses, pointing out that Eddie can send his mind through time. Allowing you to travel physically would only clutter things up, Kang points out, and Eddie smiles. Funny, that's exactly what I was hoping to do. Sure you won't reconsider, Kang, seeing as how we're best buddies now, Eddie says, and Kang refuses once more, creating 3 time clones of himself. I've always been my own best friend, Eddie. The clones launch themselves at Eddie, who releases Bedlam to attack them, eating one of the clones and allowing Doom to destroy another with an energy blast. Victor, really? I'll thank you to keep your disintegrator blast to yourselves when you're on my home, the Kang clones say. Bedlam charges forward, but the Kangs have activated their personal shields, but one suddenly falls, and Bedlam launches out, eating him. The final Kang smiles. I'm my own worst enemy as well, and now 3 fresh timelines are open for conquest, he says with a smile. What a tiresome life you lead, Kang, Doom says, the fight now over, and Bedlam returns to Eddie. Are we playing nice now? Eddie asks, and Kang nods, explaining that he thought that he would have learned to play the long game at this point. He leads the pair to another room where one of the Fantastic Four's time sleds are awaiting them. Now that you're here, I might as well help you leave. Be careful with this, though. It's a collector's item, Kang says, and Doom looks at the sled in disgust, questioning how Reed always turned everything into a family car. Jealousy is unbecoming, Victor, Kang points out, but to give Brock the time sled, Kang demands a small piece of the Bedlam symbiote. Eddie doesn't trust the Time Conqueror, but finally agrees. With the sample released, he boards the time sled and disappears. Afterwards, Doom joins Kang in his office. To satisfy my curiosity, you have symbiotes in your keep already. Why did you need Bedlam? Doom asks, motioning to the small symbiote that Eddie gave him, and Kang smiles, holding up a container, sloshing it around. Because this one isn't like the others. It's very special. It has a special role to play. Back at the Garden of Time, at the end of time, the Kings in Black, who are all Eddie Brocks, are fighting with each other, as Meredith, the truly end point of Eddie, watches. That's when the time sled suddenly rips into reality, crashing into the final Eddie, slamming him into the ground. All of the different Eddies look in astonishment as Eddie pulls himself out of the wreckage. We just crashed a time machine on your boss and burned his goo to powder. The rest of you? I'm not gonna go so easy on, Eddie says, cracking his knuckles. Meanwhile, Doom has left Kang behind, traveling through time on his platform once again. But the ruler seethes inside. Eddie Brock came to him as if he were an equal, and this Doom cannot let this stand. He scans through time for signatures of the symbiotes, which brings him to New York in the not-too-distant future from his own present. There, a great battle has taken place, with the symbiotes being at the heart of the battle. Doom looks down, knowing that this is the moment where Eddie Brock will either be saved or damned forever. He taps another button on the time platform, returning to France moments after they left in 1942. He arrives as Flexo stands on a destroyed village. He looks down at the symbiote, explaining that Brock will beat his destiny into submission, but destiny bows before Doom. Do not think, simply remember. Who forced you here? Who broke your destiny? What is your name? Doom says to the symbiote. When the time is right, you will be the hand of my vengeance against him, and his own son will be your weapon. Back in the future, Venom is now fighting against Bedlam, while Flexo watches close by.
And there you have it, Venom 21 to 25. I hope you guys enjoyed this, and like I said, I'm very sad to say that this was the last Venom video that Benny had recorded. So I'd love to know what you guys thought of it down below. Like and subscribe to the channel. I hope to see you at future Comicstorian videos. Rest in peace, Benny.